to you, O Lord.
On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of the leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited you, both of you, may come and say to you, give this person your place. And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you'll be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Grace to you and peace be God the Father through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
You may be seated. I don't know how many of you ever follow, but I think it's interesting to watch those documentaries on the animal shows, the Animal Planet, and different things. And it's really especially interesting to me how different animals establish their social order, their pack order, so to speak. Like animals like wolves and dogs, there's almost always an alpha male. And it's interesting to me that with horses, in the larger herds, there's of course the alpha male, but in the smaller, I don't know what they call them now, the little smaller herds of horses, it's almost always led by the alpha female. She's almost always the dominant leader in the smaller groups, and then she leads into whichever male she wants them to go to. So she kind of, picks a dating order, so to speak. But not just them, it's lions, many animals in the animal kingdom. And it's interesting to me that when we get to human beings, we think that we're different, and maybe to an extent we are, and that we can reason and think past some of that. However, it is still, I think, part of our base internal instincts. For example, and we know this because any of you who have ever walked through a high school cafeteria during the lunchtime hour, you know there's a packed order. And it's very well established. I mean, we all tend to kind of group together with people who are like us. But there's also a packing order to all of that. I mean, it determines who gets to date whom. I mean, all the way to lots of different things in our social structure are determined by how we arrange ourselves. And that's not a wrong or evil thing. It just seems to be how it is. I will say this, however, and this is a true story, actually. Years ago, well, not so many years ago, a few years ago when I was in high school, there's a really young fellow, he's actually a friend of mine. He was and I hate labels, and please forgive me for this, but he was a good friend of mine. I would say it to his face. He was your stereotypical nerdy kind of guy, and he was really, really smart, and he dressed the part, except he had the glasses, the hair, the whole works, and he was really funny and a lot of fun. But nevertheless, he also, not only was he kind of nerdy, but he was also the third brother down in the sibling chart, which meant in those days he wore the third hand-me-down set of clothes, which meant they never really fit completely right, and they were always worn out. But he didn't care. He was a happy guy, and he was very self-confident because he knew his brain would get him where it needed to be, and in fact it did. But nevertheless, on one particular day, this is during the lunch hour at Permian High School in Odessa, Texas. This is really fascinating to me. He walked up to the homecoming queen. Didn't say anything to anyone. He was going to shoot this. He walked up to the homecoming queen and asked her out on a date. Everyone, the whole cafeteria was hushed. I mean, it was really, in hindsight, it was hysterical. Of course, we're all waiting to see what she was going to do. Well, she was a really, really lovely young woman. I knew her from when we were both little. We were kind of the same neighborhood. And she was the ultimate of respect and dignity. She said, I'm so sorry, but I'm actually already dating someone. She goes, and I think you know him. It actually happened to be the quarterback, who about that time, of course, who actually about that time came walking up. Only he too, and I thought, man, here we go. This is going to be it. This poor guy. I really liked having him as a friend. That was my first thought. This guy was, anyway, stereotypical too. Nevertheless, he walked up to him. He shook his hand. He says, "Hey, my name is so and so." He goes, "Man," I got to her first. Too bad for you, buddy. I mean, he was really nice. I mean, he spoke to him with dignity and respect, and I thought, wow, kudos to both of these people, to her and to him, because that could have gone a whole nother way. And everyone in the room was kind of expecting that. But what they didn't expect was for them to rise above all of that nonsense and to be civilized and to act as a human being with respect to all people. And it seems to me that that's the perfect illustration for what's going on in our gospel this morning. The first, it's in actually two parts. The first part is kind of a check yourself, I think, part of the parable, where, he says, don't sit at the front of the table for crying out loud. But it's kind of a check yourself. But here's the problem with the check yourself section. And I'm going to change some words around because I think we need for it to make more sense for us in the 21st century. I think that the problem with our world today is that we often think of our privileges as blessings. And I probably have even said it myself. It is a blessing to live in the United States. It is a blessing to be a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church. I mean, all those things I think we would all agree, and whatever your stats, whatever your world is, you've been blessed in certain ways with certain statuses, whatever. We don't always understand those things as privileges. We don't always see ourselves as privileged people. But let's move out of the language of blessing for just a moment to look at it, especially in this check yourself section, as privileged. Because I think that's where the gospel is really trying to hit our hearts, is in this privilege. We're privileged. We cannot control to whom we're born, or where we're born, or even in what century we're born. We are simply born into this world. And I believe after the fact, after we're born into whatever global community we are, then yes, we're called to live out our vocation as people of God. But that's not to say, I don't believe for this, I think there's a lot of times people believe that God chose you to be born to your certain, place and time, maybe to an extent. But it is a privilege to be whatever you are, whether you're Anglo, it is a privilege to be African American, it is a privilege to be whatever you are, and as far as race, it is a privilege to be whatever gender you are. In some circles, it's privileged to be male. In other circles, it is more privileged to be the female. It is a privilege to be able to have an education, whatever it is, even up through high school. I mean, all those things are privileges. And here's the catch. Those are the things, it seems to me, that we need to check ourselves and see them for what they are. They're privileges. Now, in and of themselves, they really have no value and they're meaningless. It depends on what we do with those privileges and how they're lived out. That, to me, it leads us into the second half of the gospel, where he's speaking to his host. He says, don't be catering to all these people who can pay you back. That's not what it's about. Take your privileges, those things that you've been blessed with. The only time they really become a blessing, really, ultimately, it depends on what you do with your privileges, whether or not those privileges become a blessing or not. To just be privileged is not a blessing. It depends on if they're lived out, they are. Wealth and social position are value, they have no value unless they're used to benefit humanity. Then they become a blessing. Seems to me. And Jesus was saying the same thing. He says it over and over all through Luke's gospel. This is nothing new in Luke's gospel. You may recall that even before Jesus was born, there's this little section with his mother who basically says the exact same words, only in her world. You may recall when she first discovers she's going to have the Lord Jesus Christ, that she goes off with what we might call the Magnificat. My heart is, blessed is the God who remembers the lowly. Blessed is the God who remembers the nobody from nowhere's will. I'm paraphrasing. Blessed is the God who raised up someone who no one else would ever have even paid attention to, and made me the one to be called blessed through all generations, from now until the end of time. Blessed is the God who remembers the lowly and lifts up the poor and the widow and the orphan. That, it seems to me, that Jesus is he's not saying anything any differently than what his mother already told him before he was ever born. Depends on what you do. Your privileges are an honor. Your privileges don't become blessings until you do something with them to benefit humanity. I think that we lose that, in translation. But I think it's a powerful message that we all need to hear today. I think it's a message that somehow, some way, and really, it goes all the way back to my youth in that high school cafeteria. Those two folks, I think if I were able to go back and speak to them, they would have seen themselves as privileged. They would have seen themselves as an honor to be in the places that they were, to be a quarterback for a popular, in those days, high school team. They would have been honored she would have been honored to even be considered as a homecoming queen when she was a little girl. I mean, she was just that humble. She was just a nice person. So they would have imagined themselves, I think, to be humble. But what they did with their privilege, that's my whole point, is to lift up the lowly, to bring dignity to everyone and respect, to treat everyone as if they were a child of God. Everyone. Regardless of their social status, their economic status, their race, gender, creed, any of that. And that is sometimes harder than it sounds. Especially when you find yourselves and I've had to learn this actually kind of the hard way. In the last few years, I feel like I like to think I've grown, but I treat certain people in our community differently now than I once did, even as a pastor, honestly. Now I look homeless people in the eye. I speak to them differently than I used to. I try to speak to them with dignity and respect, whereas before I really confess I did not so much. I do now. I try to remember they're a child of God, and I don't know what brought them to that place. It's really not my business. My business is that I've been privileged to not be in their position. So what am I going to do? That's a big question. The very first and probably the most important thing I could do is treat them with respect and dignity that I would want to be treated with if we were both reversed. That's not such a hard thing to do. It's not hard to treat people with dignity. I think our world needs to hear that. I think that we're in a place in society where we need to remember that our privileges can be blessings, but they're not necessarily. All this kind of came to a head last night, and thank you for many of you who made contact last night. That you all know that my homeland is Odessa, Midland area, and there was a shooting there last night, or yesterday afternoon, excuse me. My family's all okay. Thanks for those who come. But they could have gone the other way. They could have been the ones shot just as easily as you and I could have been shot. We have been there or anywhere if there's a shooting. What are we going to do with our privilege? What are we going to do with that? How are we going to respond now? Are we to the guy that was one of them, I believe it sounds like, was caught? Are we going to hate him now and demand, revenge? What's our response as the people of God? Because to me it seems that our response to whatever drove this person to this place is important. Whatever drove this person to be so angry, so upset, so far, whatever's going on in that person's world to drive them to that place, to want to just randomly kill people, we need to stop and consider what part we may have played in that. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there because it seems to me that our gospel insists that we raise the lowly, lift up, the hurting. Well, this guy's hurting. Both of them hurt. It's time for us to consider what role we're playing. How have we used our privilege to help people, to lift people up, to do what Jesus did as he walked here, and to raise up the lowly? Maybe if we treated everyone with dignity and respect, things would start to turn out differently. I don't know that for sure, but I know it's a place we can start, and I know it's a place that the gospel drives us to our knees first, to check ourselves, and then secondly, check what we do with our privileges. Amen? Yes. May the peace which passes all human understanding keep all of our hearts and all of our minds in Christ Jesus our Lord.